Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Well, it seems as though Donald Trump has managed to do the impossible. You know, we're living through the era of Trump, and as we know, the Democrats have made it quite clear that they are not willing to play ball. They're not interested in unity or bipartisan solutions. No, their only interest seems to be resistance. We gotta resist the Trump regime at all costs. Well, that's basically the way they box themselves in, but there's a problem with that attitude. What happens if the President of the United States is built different, isn't like your typical politician, and he's willing to push executive orders or use the bully pulpit of the presidency to create grassroots momentum behind a very good idea, something that voters from both parties unanimously want and support, and that's more affordable pharmaceuticals? Well, that right there is when the anti-Trump strategy comes falling apart. Yeah, Democrats are stuck in a very tough position. Continue the anti-Trump shtick, and in the process vote against lower prescription drug costs for Americans, or fall in line and sign on to the president's agenda. I guess he's not so much of a fascist after all. A greedy capitalist billionaire placating to the billionaire class and to the corporate oligarchs. Yeah, well, what do you think's happening? Donald Trump's got Democrats falling in line already, as he's promising some long overdue pharmaceutical legislation to protect the American consumer. Yeah, Trump's got him pretty much in a stalemate. Let me show you guys what's going on, but this video is actually brought to you guys by a sponsor, so let's first play that clip. This video is brought to you guys by Ground News. Well, folks, we're once again in the Trump era, and you know exactly what that means. That means the media establishment is in full-on spin mode. In an information war, your biggest weapon is clarity, and that's where Ground News delivers. Folks, Ground News is the best news aggregator in the business, and they don't just aggregate the news, they got tools that take it to a whole new level, and their flagship tool is their blind spot page. Basically, you want to see the news that the mainstream media doesn't want you to see? Well, on Ground News' blind spot, you could see exactly that. Take this one, for instance. New York Attorney General Letitia James is now being investigated by the FBI for mortgage fraud. It's a huge story. That almost seems like mainstream media blackout on the story. I wonder why that is. Well, Ground News' blind spot shows you that for every single story out there. In times like these, you need to stay informed. You need to understand what's going on, and that's why I cannot recommend Ground News enough. And of course, here's the deal. I'm here to offer you guys an exclusive Liberal Hive Mind Ground News offer by simply clicking the link down below. That's groundnews.com/hivemind, or scanning the QR code on screen. You can get 40% off their Vantage plan. That's 40% off for full spectrum clarity in this rigged media landscape. Go ahead and take advantage of the promotion. A huge thank you to Ground News. Now back to the video. All right, folks, so here's the announcement from Donald Trump. Take a look.
So for the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs, and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down by much more, really, if you think 59. If you think of a drug that is sometimes 10 times more expensive, it's much more than the 59%. You know, it depends on the way you want to analyze it, but in one way you could analyze it that way. But between 59 and 80, and I guess even 90%. So when I worked so hard in the first term, and if I got prices down, remember I was the only one to ever get prices down for a full year, but I'd get them down like 2%, and I thought it was like a big deal. Well, we're getting them down 60, 70, 80, 90%, but actually more than that if you think about it in the way mathematically.
Question's actually fairly simple. Why are American citizens paying 5 to 10 times more for the exact same substance, made in the exact same lab by the same manufacturing company? Why? Well, there's no real answer. The drug companies claim it's R&D costs, but really it seems more like a cash grab to line their pockets with billions on the backs of the American people. You know, the reality is you've been played for suckers, and the politicians have been on the take, and so they've essentially allowed it to run rampant while pretending to care. Well, no more pretending. No more Joe Biden absorbing Donald Trump's insulin pricing policies and then pretending like he's doing something to make healthcare more affordable. Now, we got a president who's actually doing something about it, the most favored nation policy. And it's actually very simple. If another country or another consumer is able to purchase a drug at a certain price, well, then Americans should get that same market price, period. But of course, already, the special interests are sending their minions to play defense on the issue.
There are some critics of this who say, look, these are price controls, almost neo-socialist price controls on drug prices. What's your answer to that?
My answer is it's getting rid of price controls because the European governments have told the drug companies, here is the maximum price we're going to pay. If you don't give us this price, you can't sell it in our country. That is the epitome of a price control. President Trump is returning the marketplace to this and saying, look, we're going to have a global marketplace. We're going to pay the same thing in one country as we're going to pay it in the other. And we're going to stop subsidizing healthcare costs in Europe. So we are subsidizing socialized medicine in Europe on the backs of U.S. patients who are going bankrupt to pay these prices. The number one cause of bankruptcy in this country now is healthcare costs. And we have all these Americans who, we're getting them better, but then they are bankrupt and they have no money in order to subsidize price controls in Europe. So President Trump is going to get rid of the price controls.
Oh, isn't this just communist price fixing? Give me a friggin' break. There's nothing communist about this. This is basic economics. It's called market value, market rate, basic global market logic. Let's say you buy a freight container of shrimp or steel products or electronics. Let's say the container has a value of $100,000. You got Europeans importing it for $100K, maybe in neighboring nations where the import costs are slightly less due to the shorter distance and less logistical effort. Maybe they're paying slightly less, but you're still within market value. Why the hell should Americans have to pay $300,000 to $400,000, $500,000 for that same container of products? It makes literally no sense. This isn't price fixing. It's common sense policy that protects American consumers. It's basically a message to Big Pharma saying your prices should reflect supply and demand and global competition. And if you think about it, usually when you're purchasing and you're the biggest consumer in the world, you should have leverage to get the best deals in the world, not the worst. But obviously, there's some sinister agenda at play here, where politicians are on the take and they're looking another way, and meanwhile, American consumers are getting gouged on prescription drugs of all things, life-saving medicine, and that's just simply wrong. And finally, Donald Trump's doing something about it. And some Democrats are already falling in line. We've already got Ro Khanna, who's backing Donald Trump's proposal and signaling that he wants to take it from an executive order to an actual bipartisan piece of legislation that'll hit the floors of Congress. Yeah, not so much of a fascist after all, I guess. And now all these Democrats are going to have to actually vote on the floor, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they vote or what path they choose to take here, especially after all that nonsense about price gouging. Remember when they tried to redefine inflation as price gouging in a pathetic, desperate attempt to protect their boy Joe Biden from the economic disaster that he had brought upon the nation? Yeah, it was all the rage then, now wasn't it? Price gouging this, price gouging that. The grocery stores operating on a less than 10% profit margin are price gouging you. Yeah, they had no problem accusing grocery store chains of engaging in evil capitalism when the cost of eggs was going up, but when it's big pharma CEOs pricing life-saving medication at 500% markups, yeah, now they want to be silent. God forbid they support a piece of Donald Trump's legislative agenda. What a complete joke. Trump's got them looking like fools once again, and they're left with the age-old question, do you take the 80 or the 20 side of the issue? Yeah, I guess Donald Trump ain't so bad after all, huh? He's building quite the track record, now isn't he? Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you on the next one.